Nicolas Cage is one of the most entertaining actors alive today. If you've been watching my channel for a while, then you should know very well that he has starred in some stinkers. Nick Cage is one of those actors that kind of fell off for a little bit, so he made a lot of pretty bad movies. I'm guessing to pay his taxes. Because this guy, he buys a bunch of dumb shit. Nicolas Cage has starred in a lot of movies that nobody has ever seen, but one person has seen them, and you're looking at him. So I'm gonna be telling you about 3 of those movies today.
You're gonna love it!
The first one being Outcast. It was released in 2014, and it was directed by Nick Powell. This guy has very little experience directing, so take the stuff I'm about to say about this movie with a grain of salt. Or a bucket. This movie is what you'd get if you had an AI generate a medieval hero's journey. Hot white guy is an incredible warrior, but he's kind of misunderstood. He becomes washed up, but still hot. Oh my god, he's a druggie, he's a drunk, but it doesn't matter, he's still hot. He has a wise teacher that he could still learn a few things from, but they've cut ties many years ago. Oh my god, they randomly meet up again. The hot guy meets a hot waifu Asian girl. Oh my god, she's his girlfriend now, and he also saves a child. And he saves the world by sacrificing himself for the greater good, but he still survives because he's hot. So yeah, this movie's trite derivative trash. But at least it stars Nick Cage.
You're damn right, baby girl.
I mean, we gotta take the W's when we can, you know? The movie starts with Anakin Skywalker and Ghost Rider invading a Middle Eastern castle together on some sort of crusade. This is so cool. Nick Cage is riding his trusty steed. He's stabbing fools, he's blocking arrows. This movie's gonna be great, right, Nick?
You know, not really. I'm only in like 6 scenes.
Okay then. Nick has a really weird accent in this movie. I can't really place it.
The blood we spill here is on our blades, our souls, not God's.
It's like this weird bastardized English accent that's been fused with 4 other different accents from different parts of the world. His accent changes constantly throughout the movie. Nick Cage is talented, but accents aren't really his thing. So the Crusaders end up taking the castle by force. There's a time skip 3 years into the future, and now we're in the Far East with this random king. Oh my god, he's dying! And he wants his successor to be this young kid because his other older son is too cruel to be king. Where have we seen this before? Game of Thrones, Gladiator, pretty much every single medieval thing there is out there. So you guys know what happens, right? Obviously, the older son kills the king. In this movie, he blames it on the younger son, so he has an excuse to have his men go out and try and kill him. They call this guy the king, but isn't this China? Shouldn't it be the emperor? Most of the acting in this movie is pretty bad, but the king's was horrible. It was horrible.
It is in the best interests of the people.
Horrible. Movies like this that pretend that the only language on earth is English come across very childish to me. The Chinese people speak English in this movie. The Middle Eastern people speak English in this movie. Everybody speaks English and everybody understands each other. I get that that's an easier way to have the characters interact with one another, but it's also the lazy way that completely destroys immersion. Guess who ends up saving the kid? Obviously, it's Hayden Christensen. His name is Jacob in the movie, if you cared. And oh my god, this kid is being escorted by one of the hottest Asian women in the world. I wonder who she will end up with. Hayden is a Gary Stu in this movie, and it's really annoying. He makes a ridiculous arrow shot.
How's that possible?
He's a flawless swordsman, even when high on drugs. It's just a little silly, I think. The kid's name is Zhao, by the way. There's a hilarious flashback when Jacob is teaching Zhao a lesson, and we find out that Nick Cage was Jacob's instructor when he was little. And when Jacob was a child, he had the same silly mohawk haircut that he has to this day. What? You know, just because it's the same person doesn't mean they have to have the same haircut their entire life. Also, the audio in this movie is atrocious. Nearly all of the lines are terrible ADR.
I'm sorry.
And the music almost never fits the scene. It's always too epic sounding for what's occurring. This is one of those movies where they obviously couldn't film a very good combat scene because there's like a million cuts in all of them. Every once in a while, you can tell that the actors are putting their all into the action scenes. But for the most part, the action scenes are just a billion cuts. So you can't really tell what's going on, but holy shit, it's fast paced, so it must be epic. I've never seen a movie with so much action bore me to tears as well as this one has. There's non-stop action in this movie, and I fell asleep. You know what that means? I didn't give a shit about the characters because this movie didn't give me any reason to care about Zhao or his random hot sister. I think it's his sister, I'm not sure. This movie did very little to make me care about anyone, really. So yeah, when people are fighting for their lives, you just can't help but not care at all. The worst part about this movie is that Nick Cage is in this movie for the first 5 minutes, and then he disappears for like an hour, and then he pops up again. Nick's name in this movie is Ghislaine, and he has a very epic nickname, the White Ghost. It's like a 4-year-old made this movie. What an edgy nickname you've got there, Nick.
I am the White Ghost.
Nick's acting isn't the best in this movie, but at least he gives it some pizzazz, and he gets to wear a weird, like, hood hat thing. So, that was pretty cool. Isn't it always weird in medieval movies when every character has, like, perfect pearly white teeth?
Riddles give me headaches.
Does anybody else find that very distracting? I know I do. Nick does get some drunken ramblings in this movie, so that was entertaining.
That I'll drink to.
Basically, in the beginning of this movie, Ghislaine, that's his name, Ghislaine, thought he saw Jacob kill some women and their children. But he entered the room after they were already dead, so he just assumed that Jacob killed them. And then he left, disgusted, never speaking to Jacob again, until 3 years later. Wow. You know, you could have confronted him about this then and there, instead of being salty about something you didn't even see happen, and then have the truth revealed to you 3 years later. Jacob was his pupil, and he's scared to confront his pupil about something he did? Like, what? Stupid. So the good guys ambush the bad guys, and the general of the bad guys is wielding this huge goofy mace that looks like a pumpkin on a stick. So Nick's random girlfriend dies. It's not emotional at all. We know nothing about this girl. We know nothing about their relationship. So it's made all the sillier when they blast this emotional background music and force Nick Cage to cry. Bless Nick Cage, man. He tried. Ghislaine, the White Ghost, then faces a massive group of the Black Guard by himself. The White Ghost. The Black Guard. So stupid.
You want my blood? You want my blood?
This is Nick Cage's big action scene, his big moment, and it looks like shit. This scene is trying to convince us that Nicolas Cage is killing all these men by himself, but it doesn't look realistic in the slightest. He fights to his death. Oh no, he's dying. And guess what his last words are? I see you, woman. I see you.
I see you.
I guess because he's going to heaven and he can see his girlfriend who's sitting there waiting for him. I guess he just calls his girlfriend woman. That's true love right there.
What? Woman, don't you ever stop.
Very powerful stuff. So then obviously this movie turns into a duel between Hayden Christensen and the big bad guy, because how else would a 7-year-old write this? When people get injured in this movie, half the time there's just a CGI blood effect, but the clothes that they're wearing remain intact. It's very strange. Jacob's girlfriend foolishly tries to kill the bad guy. She's wounded, so in a fit of rage, Hayden takes down the big baddie, the little kid becomes king, and then that's pretty much the movie. Thank you, AI, very cool. Oh, and the hot girl survives, obviously. Like, what? How would she survive that injury? Like, look at what happened to her. Makes no sense. Anyway, next movie, Grand Isle. This one was directed by some guy named Stephen S. Campanelli. He's mostly known for doing camera work on other people's movies, like $1 Million Baby, 3 Billboards, and Maze Runner. He's directed 4 movies in total. So props to you, Nick, for putting your faith in people who don't have a lot of experience.
What can I say? I'm basically a hero.
It's really cool, but it also results in him being in a lot of pretty mediocre to bad movies. So I'm not sure how to feel about it. If he didn't do this, then we wouldn't have the best Nicolas Cage movies there are, like Pig, Mandy, and Color Out of Space. So you gotta take the bad with the good, you know? It can't always be sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes it's Grand Isle.
When was the last time you had your cock sucked?
Excuse me?
That long, huh?
This movie starts with a woman being very creepy with some Girl Scouts at her doorstep. And then there's a scene of this guy trying to rob Nick Cage's home. So Nick Cage shoots him and kills him. Oh my God, his fence is broken, so he needs someone to fix his fence. We're introduced to a guy named Buddy. He has a girlfriend and a child, and he's struggling to provide for them financially. And even worse, his girlfriend will not have sex with him. He hasn't nutted in 6 months. And his girlfriend doesn't want to help him. His balls are about to explode, lady. Buddy needs some money, so he goes to Nick Cage's house to offer to build his fence. And Nick Cage is like, sure, you can do that. If you finish it today, I'll give you a bunch of money. So Buddy tries finishing the fence. Nick Cage plays an alcoholic veteran with anger issues named Walter.
Put your dick away, Walter.
Nick's acting is a lot better in this movie than it was in Outcast.
Well, I'll be damned.
I really like it when Nick Cage plays a smelly, long-haired dickhead. I think he's pretty good at that. Then there's a scene of him sleeping with shades on. His wife tries to turn him on by singing poorly.
They can't take that away from me.
She notices that he's sleeping, so she slaps him, and he looks her up and down, and he goes,
What are you doing?
Nick is not impressed, fancy lady. That's her name, by the way. Fancy. Kind of a weird name. Whatever. Fancy brings Buddy a glass of tea by the fence. He drinks half and gives it back to her. A few moments later, he smashes his thumb because he's looking at her meat.
I saw that! Disgusting pervert!
If you notice, the glass in Fancy's hand is full again.
What?
Fancy invites him inside to get his hand cleaned up, and she wants to bang this kid because she's horny, and Nick won't have sex with her, so...
In my defense, it was November.
Nick notices them having a moment, and it's so funny. Look at him in the background.
Oh, I'm sorry. Does that bother you?
Doesn't bother me one bit.
So Buddy goes back outside and starts fixing the fence again. Then Nick puts empty beer bottles on the fence like a weirdo, and then he starts using them as target practice. Like he goes up on the roof of his house with a rifle and starts shooting these bottles that are right next to Buddy. It's so funny.
Hey, yo, what the fuck?
I mean, it makes sense, right, Nick? All you're trying to do is prove to this kid that you're the Sigma male and he's the beta cuck loser, right?
You know, I'm actually kind of into soy milk at the moment.
A huge hurricane sweeps through, but his truck won't start, so he's forced to go back inside this psycho's home in the middle of a rainstorm. So this movie does this whole thing where like they do this interview with Buddy after he's beat up and you're not sure why he got beat up, and then they go back in time and show us how it happened. I'm not a big fan of how they did it. Sometimes this works in movies, but I think that storytelling strategy worked against this movie because the audience knows that whatever happens in this house will not lead to Buddy's death. So it takes a lot of the tension away and makes the movie less exciting. There's a super awkward dinner between the three of them. Buddy tells them how he met his wife at a young age, and this is what Nick says in front of his wife.
Poor bastard's only gonna sleep with one woman for the rest of his life. He doesn't get divorced before he turns 30.
Bruh. And then this is what he says to Buddy right afterwards.
Football fan?
Or a baseball guy?
Makes sense you like a soft sport.
Makes sense that you'd like a soft soy boy beta cuck sport like baseball. He then asks Buddy when the last time he got his corn gobbled on. You guys know what I mean. And then he says, I can tell you want to f my wife.
I can tell you want to f my wife.
Nick just does not hold back in this movie, does he? Fancy comes back and shoves her leg into Buddy's crotch under the table.
How's that julep taste?
So far, this movie is amazing. And then Walter goes to bed. Like, he just sits in his chair and goes to sleep. Like, Buddy is still there, awake, and you know that Buddy wants to bang your wife, and you know your wife wants to bang Buddy. Why would you go to sleep? The basement door has like 40 locks on it, and Buddy asks Fancy what's down there. And Fancy replies, oh, it's just storage. What, are you afraid the boxes of Christmas lights are going to escape? Obviously, it's not storage. She couldn't think of a better excuse. And why didn't Buddy question this? She then brings Buddy up to their bedroom and he just follows her. This movie tries to convince you that Buddy loves his wife, but he just kind of goes along with everything Fancy does.
Come on, let's go upstairs.
He does resist eventually, but come on, dude. What are you doing? Don't follow her upstairs. You know where this is leading. She put her foot on your headshot. Like, what are you doing, dude? At this point, if I were Buddy, I would risk the hurricane and run to a neighbor's house. But Buddy does not do that. Fancy has a bunch of weird witch dolls on her dresser. She then gets very heavy-handed with her flirting. Buddy trips, Nick wakes up from the sound, and he walks upstairs. Somehow, Nick doesn't notice Buddy, and Buddy goes downstairs to sleep on the couch. The thunder then wakes him, and he notices Nick sitting across from him, smoking a cigar, with a revolver in his hand. He brings Buddy up to the attic and tells him a war story.
My entire squad. Every single one of them.
Nick's acting during this part is pretty good. Too bad it's in this movie, and then we get the big reveal. Nick offers Buddy 20 grand to kill his wife. Oh my God. I burst out laughing when this happened. I swear to God I was dying. Because at this point in the movie, you think he wants him to kill his wife because his wife just won't stop flirting with people. The bitch is too horny. Put her out of her misery. Here's 20 grand to do it. He then tells Buddy that his wife was diagnosed with terminal blood cancer. She doesn't have long to live, and soon her life will be nothing but suffering. So he wants to put her out of her misery, but he can't do it himself. So he wants Buddy to poison her. Buddy desperately needs the money, so he agrees. Instead of waiting for her to fall asleep, he turns into a peeping Tom and peers in at her when she's taking a bath. She notices him there and she's like, come on in, buddy. Let's have some fun. And he's like, okay. Nick Cage is in the house, Buddy. What are you doing? And he's not asleep anymore. And then Buddy decides to bang Nick's wife in the bathroom when Nick is a couple rooms away at most. What is happening? In what world would he decide to do this? And then they fall asleep together. Buddy wakes up miraculously before Nick enters the room to find them there. Fancy notices the bottle of poison and confronts Buddy about it. Buddy tells her that Nick wants him to kill her. He then asks her if she has terminal blood cancer, and she says no. Oh my God. Then why does Nick want to kill her? In the next scene, Fancy speaks to Nick. She tries to convince him to leave the past behind, and it's time to move forward with our relationship. Coming from the woman who literally just cheated on him. Cool. And then she stabs his hand out of nowhere. And this is his reaction. Oh my God. You see that shit? This movie is so entertaining at times, so I have to give it props, but overall, it's really bad.
Pour it on the rag. Pour it on the rag!
Pour it on the rag! Nick wants you to pour it on the rag, Buddy. Pour it on the rag. At gunpoint, Buddy is forced to poison Fancy. But at the last second, he attacks Nick, and they get into a brawl. Nick gets his ass kicked, so Buddy ties him up. The punch sound effects in this movie are horrible. They remind me of old school Indiana Jones sound effects. Nick reveals to Buddy that Fancy has a dirty little secret in the basement. Buddy takes the key from Walter and unlocks the basement. Before he can go down there, Fancy shoots at him with Walter's gun. The sound effects for the gun are terrible as well. You can find better gun sound effects on YouTube for free. So I'm going to replace the sound effects for this gun and then compare them. Which one do you like more? Whoever was responsible for the sound design for this movie, just know that you completely butchered it. Buddy ends up finding a paralyzed man held captive. Fancy unties Walter, and they make amends with each other very quickly. She just stabbed your hand, dude. But he's just like, dang, that really sucks. Why'd you have to do that? And she's like, sorry, dude.
Did you have to stab me so hard?
Buddy and Walter get into another brawl, and Nick says, but Nick, he is very clearly fighting back, so. What? Buddy kicks Nick down the hole that leads to the attic. It looks like it hurt. Buddy tries to escape, but is bonked unconscious by Fancy.
Hey, you're finally awake.
Buddy wakes up in a truck with a body next to him, and the police bring him in for murder. After questioning, the police go to Walter's home with a search warrant. Now, you would assume that Walter and Fancy would have removed any incriminating stuff from their home, right? Especially after leaving Buddy alive in a truck with a body in the middle of nowhere for the police to find. Clearly, Buddy is going to lead them to your house. And guess what, guys? They didn't remove shit. There wasn't a lot of foresight in this plan. They just dumped him in a truck. They would have been better off just killing Buddy and burying him. Like, what the hell? The police find a girl locked up in the basement. Walter is able to escape in his car.
I said my cat is stuck up in a tree. Would you shoot him down for me?
And the police arrest Fancy. I don't understand why Fancy didn't run out of the room with Nick. Like, she just kind of stayed behind. Anyway, at the end of the movie, Nick cleans himself up, he gets in uniform, then kidnaps Buddy's wife, and forces him to reveal a secret from his past that doesn't matter to the plot at all. Nick was supposed to be an ex-Marine, but he's wearing a bizarre-looking quasi-military uniform that doesn't belong to any of the branches of the armed forces, with the rank insignia of both Army Private 2 and Specialist 4, along with a checkered tie and 2 Army Marksmanship medals. They just put him in a random military uniform and hoped nobody from the military would watch this movie. I haven't served in the military, so I wouldn't have known that. Obviously, I did some research and found this out. I can't imagine being someone who served and seeing this uniform, because the fact that Nick is a veteran is a huge part of his character. So you'd think making the uniform accurate would be important to the plot? I guess not. The police show up and Walter is gunned down. As far as what Fancy was up to with those weird witch dolls and why they were kidnapping teenagers, well, she can't have kids of her own, but she always wanted a big family. So why not kidnap a bunch of people and force them to have kids for you, and then lock them in your basement? What the hell? Walter clearly has money. He was gonna give 20 grand to this kid just to kill his wife. He drives a nice car, their house is not small. They could definitely afford to adopt children. And what the hell is the use of a big family if it's locked up in your basement? What the hell? Oh my God. So yeah, this movie was dumb as hell, but at least it was pretty entertaining at times, unlike the first one. The last movie, Army of One. It was released in 2016. Surprisingly, this movie is directed by someone who made a lot of very successful movies. His name is Larry Charles. He directed Borat, Religulous, Bruno, and The Dictator. Apparently, he's also a comedian. I mean, it makes sense, right? Because all of his movies are comedies. And to be honest, I think all of his movies are pretty entertaining, except this one. And of course, it had to be the movie starring Nicolas Cage.
Did you know who I am?
This movie is not nearly as low budget as the other two I spoke about, but it bombed hard in the box office.
God damn it!
Nobody saw this. This movie is based on a real person named Gary Faulkner, who was arrested in 2010 in Pakistan, carrying a sword, pistol, night vision goggles, a map, and a Bible on his one-man quest to capture bin Laden. On paper, this sounds hilarious. Even the trailer made it seem like this could be a pretty funny movie. After watching it, God, it's painful, dude. It's so painful. There's a couple silly moments. I chuckled a couple times here and there, but this movie is hard to watch. I'm sorry, Nick, but maybe comedies aren't your thing. Nick is the funniest when he's not trying to be funny. When he's acting outrageous, that's when the real comedy shines. When he's trying to be funny, you get movies like this.
Man, this country makes the best goddamn chicken wings in the world. Now, I haven't seen the whole world.
Oh, God. This movie stars Russell Brand before he was a YouTuber, and of course, Nicolas Cage. This movie is about the standard American Discord mod.
If there weren't people like me doing things that people like you told us that we couldn't do, then nothing great would ever get done.
Nick Cage's voice in this movie is a bit eccentric,
I'm a butterscotch man myself, but I can go either way.
to say the least. If you watch interviews with the real Gary Faulkner, he doesn't come across nearly as annoying as he does in the movie.
For all of those that had something negative to say, it sucks to beat you.
I don't know how Gary feels about this movie, but if this were a movie about me, I think I would find it insulting. Gary Faulkner in this movie is exceptionally annoying. One of those people that could quickly turn a fun party into a night from hell if you run into them. Gary is very upset that the government can't find Osama bin Laden, so he's gonna take care of it himself. I mean, God told him to, so of course he's gonna do it. Guess who plays God? Russell Brand. So let me get this straight. God's British, and he wants an American to take down Osama bin Laden. Checks out. One of Gary's best friends in this movie is named Pickles. Because of course, his name is Pickles. Does Gary in real life have a best friend named Pickles? Maybe. Maybe he does. I'm pretty sure Nick says, I'm sailing to Pakistan to capture bin Laden, like a million times in this movie.
Sailing to Pakistan.
Sailing to Pakistan.
Sail to Pakistan. While I'm sailing to Pakistan. I'm going to sail to Pakistan.
Sailboat.
Yeah, to go to Pakistan to capture bin Laden. Trying to go to Pakistan so I can capture Osama bin Laden.
He tells everybody his plan. Everybody. There's a lot of scenes of Nick with his girlfriend Marcy, and all of them are boring. I wish all of them were removed. It's pretty astonishing that the same person who made Borat and Bruno made this movie, because both of those movies are hysterical. Nick's voice can be funny at times, but it's more often annoying than it is funny. He knocks over a bunch of kayaks in a store, and then he buys a hang glider because he wants to hang glide into Pakistan. He tells the cashier that he's the Donkey King. Whatever that means. I guess this guy had some weird nicknames in real life. Gary almost gives up on his mission until God shows up at the bar to convince him otherwise. This scene is painful in many ways.
You're a disappointment.
I've been waiting for you to help me.
Gary, shut the fuck up.
Let me tell you about a scene that I thought was funny. There's a part when Gary convinces this guy to stamp his travel papers, and yeah, it's pretty hilarious.
Well, do you believe in God and America and justice and freedom? And just doing what's right?
The more hilarious part being, how the hell did this crazy person find his way to Pakistan? Apparently he did find his way there. Nick's laugh for this Gary character is pretty funny at times.
I love America too!
Is this guy how the rest of the world sees Americans? Probably. There's a scene where a bunch of Middle Eastern men mistake his last name for Faulkner. It's very funny because Faulkner sounds like Fuckner. Oh my God. Gary performs reconnaissance to try and find Osama bin Laden, which is basically just wandering around Pakistan with a katana. He tells a butcher that in order to sell his meat, he has to speak to it, and then this guy miraculously gets a lot of customers because he's speaking to his meat. It's so annoying. Gary loses a tooth in one scene, so he has dental surgery performed on him in the middle of the street. He smokes weed out of a can with some random guys, and then someone steals his money. What the hell is happening in this movie? You can't make a movie like Borat and Bruno and expect it to be just as funny when there aren't real people involved experiencing these pranks. You know? I feel like this movie would have been greatly improved if they just made it in the Bruno and Borat style, where they had Nick act as this weird character and doing all this crazy stuff, and then onlookers thinking it's very strange. Obviously, they would have to change his face a little bit because everybody knows what Nick Cage looks like.
Yeah, handsome son of a bitch, that's what.
But still, I think that would have been a lot funnier and a lot more down this guy's alley. As it stands, this movie sucks. It's hardly ever funny. There are a couple funny parts in this movie, and I'm going to be showing all of them in this video, so there's literally no point in you watching this. Then Gary demonstrates to some men the power of a weeb.
Step aside, motherfuckers. 100% pure Japanese Damascus steel.
Rainn Wilson from The Office is randomly in this movie. He's one of the guys searching for the American Samurai, which I guess some Pakistani people dubbed Gary Faulkner. Nick falls off a camel in one random scene. They were so desperate to think of funny things to put in this movie that they just like put them all in and just hoped for the best. Gary cries like a baby whenever he's speaking to God, and it's not funny at all. It's embarrassing to watch. And then there's a scene when Gary fails to ride a motorcycle through an outdoor market. Nick's voice changes constantly throughout this movie. He couldn't keep the same voice to save his life. I'm gonna play 4 scenes back to back and just listen to his voice in all these scenes.
Marcy, you're so funny. It's gonna take a boombox. Well, I love America, so we're even.
I love America too!
I'm pretty sure more people kick ass here than in any other country.
They're so different. Gary hang glides and notices bin Laden, and he swoops down to get him. He wakes up connected to a dialysis machine, and when he sees bin Laden across from him, his reaction is goofy as hell.
Assalamu alaikum, bitty boy.
They then have a sword fight, and it's awful. Of course, this is all happening in a dream, and when he wakes up, he's connected to a dialysis machine, and he's swiftly deported. There's a really weird meta moment when Nick mentions himself, which would have worked a lot better if he was disguised as someone else, and he said this in front of a real person who didn't know it was him, but they just didn't do that for some reason.
Hollywood called, and they want to make a movie about the G. Don't you think I look a little like Nick Cage in Con Air?
At home, Gary watches Obama announce to the world that Osama has been killed. Gary doesn't believe it, so he leaves to find and capture bin Laden. Again. This movie is terrible.
It's a lie!
And it sucks so bad because you can tell Nick really tried to make this movie funny, and the potential was there, you know? Oh well. According to Nick, director Larry Charles didn't get a final cut. Co-star Paul Scheer revealed in his Unspooled podcast that the film was distributed by the company of Harry Weinstein and Bob Weinstein, who were notorious for re-editing movies against their director's wishes. To circumvent this problem, Charles had frequent discussions with his editor about what shots he needed. He purposely limited the amount of footage shot and did a lot of in-camera editing as to give the Weinsteins less opportunity to interfere with the final product. So that kind of reveals why this movie was so bad. It wasn't the movie that Larry Charles wanted to make. But even with what we got, I still think he went in the wrong direction with it. He should have just did what he was good at, you know? Then this movie could have been something really special. At the end of the movie, it's stated that Gary is going to use the money made from this film to buy a kidney so he can continue his mission to find and capture Osama bin Laden. Holy shit. So yeah, Nick, what do you have to say for yourself?
A guy's gotta do what a guy's gotta do sometimes, Elvis.
Yeah, they're terrible. These movies suck. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked this video. Make sure to visit alienclothing.com, my personal clothing brand. That's AYYLIEN clothing.com. We have a bunch of really awesome designs over there, and I think you'll like them. Thank you so much to all my patrons that make videos like this possible. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.